Good morning, everyone. Another day, another job. Today we will be doing the rear brake discs on our Range Rover Sport on both sides. Why we're doing this? Well, about a year and a half ago, I got new brake discs installed. And apparently when they got installed, a mistake has been made in that the parking brake shoes were too tightly adjusted, and this led to the brakes overheating on multiple occasions. On this side, this is the rear left side, and as you can see right now, there are clear marks on the disc from overheating, and this wouldn't necessarily be a problem in its own right, unless I would have issues on the road, and I do have some minor issues on the road in the sense that occasionally I get vibrations from braking and also vibrations while driving, some of them quite unpleasant. So I'm fairly confident it's due to this disc, so I'll definitely have to replace this one. So this one has at the moment about 1.5 years and about 30,000 kilometers, give or take. That's about 20,000 miles. It's in, let's say it's not terribly used, but I'm gonna be replacing it anyways, just to clear out all the issues that I encountered. Now, as always, when you replace brake discs, it's highly recommended to do both discs from the same axle, and I'll be doing this today on the left and on the right side. Just a quick note about the brands that I chose to work with. So the existing ones over here, these are Zimmermann's, made in Germany. I won't make any comments about the general quality of Zimmermann's because Zimmermann is an OEM brand, so they are, I'm guessing they are pretty good. But in my case, with the experience of the parking brake shoes, as well as the fact that with Zimmermann discs and Zimmermann pads, I get squeaks, which I wasn't really expecting. I am switching brands, so out with the Zimmermanns, in with these new ones, and these are made by ATE, also German. ATE is also a well-known brand for brake components, so I'll give these one a go and see how they behave. And without further ado, let's get to work. And the first and extremely important step that we have to do, we have to raise and support the car. Now, to make your life easier, bring the car up to off-road height, because this will mean you'll have less distance to travel when you raise it. And after you do raise it, make sure it's supported on proper jack stands, not just the normal jack. Okay, these are 3-ton jack stands, and I've used 2 to make sure we're absolutely secure. I've also left the jack itself here as an extra security. The car isn't necessarily raised more than it needs to be. I have like maybe a centimeter or so off the ground for the rear wheels, which is more than I need. And thirdly, use the 2 chokes that you should find in the boot of the car, in the front of the 2 front wheels, to make sure it doesn't move forward. Make sure the car is in park. This is mandatory because you'll have the rears up and no handbrake. So the only thing preventing the car from moving will be the parking pole inside your gearbox. All right. And with that done, we need to bring the electronic parking brake into service mode to be able to operate on the brake discs. The first method to disable the electronic parking brake applies, for example, when you don't have a diagnostic tool that has an EPB service mode function. And it's as follows, fairly simple. Okay, you put the contact on, but don't start the engine. With the brake applied, disable the parking brake, just as you would normally would. And then you go to the engine bay, where you have your fuse box over here. And there's this fuse, this 30 amp fuse, this pink one, which is actually labeled, even though it's a bit upside down, It's this one here. You see it says FL8 30 amps and the handbrake sign. You simply remove this and keep it out as long as you're working on the brakes. This will effectively disable the electronic parking brake system altogether and make sure it doesn't get automatically turned back on. The second option applies when you actually have something like this, like a diagnostic tool, which is Land Rover specific. You need to hook it up to your OBD port, which is down here. Have the starter button pressed. And then what you need to do is you need to search for the functions related to the electronic parking brake. This is a Vident i400 with support for Land Rover. And it has already detected the type of vehicle. We go into hot function. We wait a bit for the functions to appear. Electric parking brake. And what you need to do is we need to drive the parking brake to the mounting position. This is equivalent to putting it in service mode. Driving it, the second option, driving it to the latching position, is used to restore it to normal operating mode. So drive the parking brake to the mounting position, set the ignition switch to position 2. It's already in position 2. We hit OK, waiting for the system to stabilize. System battery voltage should be in that range. It is. I checked. Hit OK. Set the ignition switch to off. We did. Hit OK. Set it to on again. That's a different car that started, not mine. Press any key to continue. And you heard that noise, that prolonged noise, which confirms that we've put our parking brake into the service mode. It says test complete. Hit OK. Set the ignition switch to off. By the way, you can see how it blinks there. That means it's in service mode. So ignition switch to off. We hit OK. Turn it on again. That's the beep confirming that it's in service mode. Hit OK. Completed successfully. Okay. And we shut it down. We can remove the diagnostic tool now. And we just go and double check. Let's try and spin the wheels. And as you can see, we can spin the wheels by hand, which indicates that the parking brake has indeed disabled. So that's good. Onwards to removing the wheels, disassembly, so we can access the discs. So let us now examine the state of the existing rear brake discs. This one is from the right side. Okay, you can see it's in pretty good shape. It has only a very small lip. But you can also see this one has some burn marks on it as well. But I mean, this is not too bad. Okay, same here where it should vent. So this is in fairly okay shape. However, the left one is clearly in worse shape. So you can, if you look here, you see all of this. This indicates that the rotor has overheated in the past. And it's because there was friction with the electronic parking brake shoes, which are inside. Okay, they weren't properly calibrated when these were mounted. And this is most likely the cause of our vibrations and issues. Okay, so this one has to go, and we'll be replacing both of them in pair. Right, okay. With that done, the first thing we need to do is to create some room here between the disc and the normal brake pads, so that we're able to remove the caliper and the caliper mounting bracket, so that we can have access to the discs. And because we don't really care too much about the discs, we're going to throw them away. We're just going to use the tip of a screwdriver to make a little bit of a separation. This is what it looks like from the back. This is our disc. This is our inner pad. So we could just put our screwdriver here and gently push the inner pad towards the caliper piston like this, so that a little room is formed. Okay, you can see when I do this that a small gap appears. It doesn't have to be big, just enough to allow us to remove the caliper afterwards. You can do the same on the right side. Before disassembling anything on the rear right caliper, make sure to remove the brake pad wear sensor, which is this wire here. You just need to grab and pull on it gently, okay, and with patience it eventually comes out, just like that. Make sure to not lose that metal clip on the tip. Okay, store it somewhere safe to the side, and then you need two hex keys like these. A 17 millimeter one for the inner part of the lower bolt that holds the caliper guide pin, and the outer one is 13 millimeter. This one is to hold it in place, and this one is to screw or unscrew it, and just gently twist on the 13 millimeter one until it starts to move. Okay, you basically need to remove this lower screw, the same on the left side, and then the entire caliper can be twisted upwards. I'll show that in a minute. And back to our rear left caliper, we've removed the screw from the lower guide pin, and then we grab our caliper and we gently shake it and twist it until we can remove it, pointing it upwards. It won't go higher than this because of this limit on the caliper bracket, but we don't care too much about that, because right now we just want to remove the brake pads. And you see them here. This is the outer one that comes out easily, and let's see if I can also remove the inner one using the 3 hands that I have. I tried to make a joke, that's not very good, I'm sorry. But there we go. Managed to remove it as well. And then we put the caliper back on. So let's look at the state of the pads. You can see that there's still a lot of meat left on the pads. Now there is a recommendation, a very good recommendation normally, that when you replace the discs, you should also replace the pads. But normally the discs get replaced at a point where the pads need replacing, so that makes sense. But in our case, the pads still have many more miles left on them, so we won't really replacing these. But now that the pads have been removed, because we just want access to the disc, we don't need to remove the caliper from the caliper bracket, i.e. we don't need to remove this bolt as well. We just need to go back here and remove the 2 larger bolts that actually hold the caliper bracket in place. And once we have these removed, we're gonna put everything to one side, hold it in place, and we'll be in a position to remove the discs. And these bolts work with this kind of bit. It's a 15 millimeter one, but it has 12 sides rather than your usual 6. And you can try directly with a ratchet, though they're normally tightened to about 100 plus Newton meters, so a ratchet might not suffice. You may need a breaker bar just to loosen them up. I have loosened them up already with a breaker bar, so the ratchet should Now just do the job, and it is. Okay, so just remove them normally. Do keep track of which goes where. They're typically identical, but it makes sense to put them back in the exact order. The same for the lower one. Okay, just do this until they come out. The same on the right side. And very important, when you have removed this, make sure to store it to the side and anchor it to something, okay, because this is heavy, and if you don't anchor it with a wire or something to keep its weight, it's gonna dangle on the brake line, and there's a serious risk of ripping up the brake line. You don't want that to happen. So I'll show you in a minute how this should be tightened so that there's no tension on the brake line. And here they are after dismounting. So as you can see, I have retained the caliper connected to the caliper bracket, and the entire set of components is linked with this cable to the top of the air suspension strut. So the cable is taking on the weight, and there is no tension on the brake line. Okay, and I've done the same on the other side. And now, before we continue disassembling, it would be nice to do some run-out measurements to actually check the state of the current discs and see if they are or are not within specifications. And we've installed this small run-out measuring dial, which you can see right here. And this one, it sets so that the difference between two consecutive lines is 0.01 millimeters. And as per the technical manual of the car, it says that the maximum run out of the hub and disc combined for the rear should never exceed 0.09 millimeters. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna spin the hub with the disc brake, with the brake disc, sorry, and we need to check the values and make sure that it doesn't exceed 0.09. If it does, it means that the disc needs changing. So let's see. Whoa. Okay, so now it's at 70, and it goes even way past 85. So that's way in excess of 0.09. That's closer to 0.15. So that's over the limit. We definitely need to take the disc out, and later on we'll also measure the run out of the hub. We need to make sure that the hub is in order. If the hub has too large a deviation, we may later need to replace the hub itself. Hopefully that's not the case. But in any case, this disc is definitely out of spec in combination with the existing hub. Okay, so I'm gonna do some measurements on the other side as well. The process is the same. And then we can finally proceed with removing the discs. And just before I forget, when you actually do run out measurements on any of the discs, the manual says you should install all 5 nuts and tighten them to about 140 Newton meters. I would say maybe 3 is enough. Make sure they form a triangle with the hub center at the center of the triangle, so that and tighten them by hand, so that the disc is properly seated. When we measured the run out before, we had these installed, so with the best possible conditions, this is out of spec. I've actually taken the time to measure the run out on the right hand side disc, and that was up to 0.05 millimeters without the nuts installed. Okay, so if I would have gone and installed the nuts, the number would have gone down because the disc would have been better seated. So that obviously means that the right hand side disc is within specifications. The left hand side disc is definitely out of specification, but we're gonna replace them both because that's how it should be done normally. Okay. And in order to remove the disc, there are 2 things that need to be done. Number 1, you have to remove this bolt which holds the disc in place. This is a Torx 50 T50 head. Depending on when the last time was when you replaced the disc, this may have rusted, so you might need maybe to smack it with a hammer or something at first to maybe loosen the rust. In my case, it's coming out pretty easily. I've just used a normal wrench, smacked it at the top like this a couple of times, and it started getting loose, and then it comes out pretty easily. It shouldn't be too much of a hassle to remove this one. Let's take it out all the way. Just like that. And the second thing is we need to, because inside of the rotor there are the parking brake shoes, there is an adjuster that's located down here on the left hand side and somewhere up here on the right hand side, which you can access through this plastic cap that you need to remove with the tip of a screwdriver, just like this. It should come out fairly easily. And let me see if I can film inside this small little hole. If the wheel is in the correct position, assuming I can twist it by hand, you should see. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to show it to you like this. Let me just find it and then I'll show it. And using a rather nice combination of the phone's camera plus a small lighter, if I can pinpoint it to you, there it is. You can just ever so slightly see it over there. It's like that's the adjuster right over there. You see it has that small tipped wheel, and what you need to do is you need to grab your screwdriver and put it inside, and you need to turn the wheel downwards away from the center of the hub until you can no longer turn it, something like this. You do it until you can no longer turn it at all, and once that is done, you'll know that the two brake shoes are as close together as they can be, and that's the moment when you can physically remove the disc. I've already turned it a couple of times. Let's see if I can get it one or two more times. Okay, I think we're close to the limit now. And at this point, with very little effort, we should be able to move the disc ever so slightly. You see it's starting to move. There you go. Might need a mallet or something to remove it, but in any case, at this point we're very close to having it taken off. And after some struggling and some liberal use of this rather lovely hammer, I got the disc out. Okay, now let's examine the damage. Well, as I expected, everything is almost completely black. And take a look at what's inside the disc. See all of that black dust. And actually, if you take a look on the inside, you can see those blackish spots on the surface of the disc. See these ones? You can even run your finger on top of them and you can actually feel that they come out a bit. Okay, as far as I know, this is what's called cementite, and it's what happens when you overheat the brakes and some material from the pads actually fuses with the iron of the disc and can no longer be cleared, and this is one of the sources of vibration when you brake. And as I suspected, I'm pretty certain that at least these cementite deposits on the inside of the disc are part of the reason I was constantly experiencing vibrations while driving. Right, so this disc definitely needs to come out, and before we do anything else, we need to start cleaning the wheel hub and the parking brake shoes with using brake cleaner. And just, well, there still seems to be some in this bottle. There we go. There was some inside. And now let's see the dirt coming out. Well, let's try another bottle then. There it is. All that lovely black dust that's coming out now. That is just lovely. Anyway, I'm gonna keep doing this to make sure the hub gets cleaned. First of all, remove all the dust. We're gonna inspect the parking brake shoes, which actually appear to be in pretty good shape, apart from some rather visible scratches. But then again, these get used quite rarely, and there's still a lot of thickness left in them, so I don't really see any good reason to change them at this time. So I'm just gonna continue cleaning. Also, I'm gonna clean all this grease from the wheel hub and get back to you when it's all done. And when cleaning, note that in principle brake cleaner is not enough, and you should really end up using something like a universal impact drill with some with a drill head like this, with a brush, and just work your way all around the place to make sure it gets as clean as it can. Something like this. Okay, you get it. And I'm done with the cleaning on this side. So as you can see, I got it as close as possible to the original metal finish. I think it looks much better than before. I took some time to grease some of the spots behind the parking brake shoes. So there's one here, there's one here, and one beneath, and also one here, one back there, and another one there. And I greased them a little bit. And now what I'm also gonna do, I'm gonna grease this surface of the hub, because this is where the actual hub and disc mate together. And you definitely want to grease this part to make it easier to remove the disc next time, because otherwise the inside of the disc is just gonna rust on the surface and gonna be much more difficult to remove later on. Now, with regards to greasing, lots of people recommend copper grease, but I've actually read online some brake manufacturers that specifically say not to use brake grease. My choice is this sort of ceramic grease. This is from Techstar. It's called Ceratec. So it's a sort of non-conductive ceramic based grease. Okay, it doesn't have copper in it. And I've used it in the past with very, very good results. No problems at all. So I'm just gonna grease this side. Okay. And then it's time to put the new disc on. And just to mention, I've actually measured the run out of the hub, and it's well within the limits. It's 0.02. So that makes me very happy. It means there's no problem with the hub itself. Okay, moving on. And here is the disc installed. The first thing after you physically put it in place is you need to put this bolt back on and tighten it to 35 Newton meters. This is the Torx T51. Now, after you've done this and before doing anything else, I suggest it's a good idea to do a run-out check. Okay, for that I put 2 of the wheel nuts so that there's sufficient pressure on the disc from all sides. And we can now check our run-out meter and see how it behaves. So if you take a look, it's significantly better than before, right? So before we had a run-out of up to 0.15 millimeters, and this time the hub plus disc does not seem to exceed 0.3, 0.4. And the limit given in the manual is, 0.03 to 0.04. And the limit given in the manual is 0.09, which means that this disc is properly aligned, which is a very good thing. After we've done this checkup, which we'll have to do on the other wheel as well, it's time to do basically the hardest part of the operation, which is the adjustment of the handbrake components inside the disc. And what makes it difficult? Well, is that first of all, you have to do everything through this little hole here. And number two is, if you don't get it right, you will have rear brake issues, just like I had with the previous discs. Now, because it's gonna be very difficult to show you what's going on as I'm working on this side with the disc already installed, I think the best way to go around is I'm gonna disassemble the old disc from the right side and show you in detail what you're supposed to do. Okay, let's get to it. And here is the rear right hand side wheel hub. I've already removed the disc. As you can see, there's no black dust inside this disc, and the parking brake shoes are in better condition, so definitely the problem was not related to this side. I've already done the cleaning up. Just wanted to mention one small detail. So as before, I used the metal brush to clean the surface of the hub, especially this rim, this outer rim, because this is the rim which actually on which the disc actually sits. So this needs to be as flat as possible. And funny thing, I was doing the cleaning, I measured the runout, and it was quite big, about 0.07. So then I continued cleaning for a while longer, and then I got the runout to be between 0.02 and 0.03 millimeters. So if you're at this point, do insist on cleaning, especially this rim, as good as you can. I've also greased the shoe sitting points. Here, another one there, this one, and this one. And I can now show you the adjustment steps, the theory on the adjustment steps, just as the workshop manual for the Range Rover Sport describes them. So let's get started. The first step is we need to check that the parking brake cable is not fused or locked on to this parking brake shoe. This is on the right hand side. On the left hand side is going to be symmetrical. What does this mean? You have to locate this hole. Obviously it's not as easy because you'll be doing this with the disc on. And if you take a look inside the hole, let me light it up a bit, you see that is the cap where the cable ends to the left, and to the right is the connecting point to the shoe. And what they tell you to do is you use the tip of a screwdriver, and you have to make sure there is play between them. Okay, so let's see if I can show this to you. I put it in here, and as I move it, the cable does move a bit separate from the shoe. Okay, and if, for example, you move the entire set of shoes to one side or the other, the ensemble does move relative to the cable. So that means everything in order, and you can proceed to the next step. On the left hand side, everything's going to be symmetrical relative to the center of the hub, meaning that this hole is actually going to be placed around here, somewhere around here as you're looking at the hub. So this was step one. Step number two is a little bit easier. What they tell you to do is you need to rotate the hole in the disc to around this region where the parking brake shoe adjuster is. This is the right hand side, and as I told you, on the left hand side it's going to be symmetrical relative to the center, so it's going to be somewhere around there. Okay, and what they tell you to do is with a flathead screwdriver, basically you need to push both parking brake shoes towards the center of the hub without applying excessive force. How you do that? Well, once the disc is installed, imagine that you create leverage. You put this through the hole, and as you raise your screwdriver, you are going to be pressing on this part and effectively bringing this shoe towards the center. And then if you press on this part, okay, you're going to be bringing this shoe towards the center. Obviously on the left side, as I keep saying, it's symmetrical. So from this point on, you'll be pressing on the screwdriver, and that's going to push the shoe upwards towards the center, and similarly to one on the other side. Okay. After each of these steps, do give the wheel one complete spin to make sure that there is no additional friction than it was before, or maybe if it is, it's minimal. So this was steps 2. The most important one is the next one. The third step has to do with adjusting the clearance of the parking brake shoes relative to the disc. This is the most important one in my opinion, and it's where the mistake was made on the left hand side on the old disc. So with the disc installed, again, the hole needs to be aligned exactly with this little gear or sprocket, I'm not sure what the English term is. And what you basically need to do is you need to turn it towards the center of the hub. So with the screwdriver, you need to be putting the screwdriver upwards on this side and downwards on the left side until you can no longer turn the wheel by hand. In Bodsy's Brake Bible, the free PDF on the how to do brakes on Disco 3, 4 and Range Rover Sport, they actually give you a torque value. If I remember correctly, it's between 40 and 90 Newton meters, but anyway, go ahead and check the document because it's written clear right there. And what he says there is that once you apply that torque on the hub and it clicks, you know that this is as tight as it needs to be. Right. And after you've done this, this is very important. You to grab a marker, for example, with a red, white, yellow, preferably a more open color. You mark the frontmost tooth that you can see. In this case, for example, it would be this one. And then what you need to do is you need to turn the wheel in the other direction exactly one full rotation. The issue with this is that the manual also says 10 clicks. It says exactly one full rotation, and in brackets it says 10 clicks. The problem with the 10 clicks is you might, for example, try to do one rotation and you might get your screwdriver to slip. So you might think, okay, I did one more click, but in fact you didn't. Okay, so don't necessarily rely on the number of 10 clicks. Just make sure that you mark this tooth clearly and you rotate until the marked tooth comes back to the same location. That's when you'll be 100% certain that you did one full rotation. Okay, check and double check this, make sure the shoes are properly adjusted, otherwise you might run into the same issues that I ran into. And the last adjustment has to do with this bolt here on the side. This is a 6mm Allen, and what you need to do after you've done all the other steps is you rotate the disc so that the hole lines with this, and with a 6mm Allen you're supposed to untwist it by half a turn, no more no less than half a turn. Then you grab a soft-faced mallet, so not a metal one, something with rubber for example, and you are supposed to gently hit the disc on its side around this area, because there's some adjustment that's happening behind this brake shoe when you're doing that. So you gently hit it with the rubber mallet for a while, and then you turn this back to its original position. The manual says 6 Newton meters, so it doesn't need to be very tight. Okay, and after you've done all these 4 steps, the adjustment is complete and you can continue with reassembling everything back. And I'll show you the reassembly steps as I go along. So as I said before, with the reinstallation, after you've cleaned everything up, apply some Ceratec on the surface of the hub, especially on the outer rim. This will help a lot when you take the disc off the next time. It prevents rusting. And that would be an interesting thing to see if I can actually put the disc with one hand. Let's see if I can. Wow, success. So here's the disc in place. Press it gently, reinstall this bolt, tighten it to 35 Newton meters. You don't need to put thread locker on it, because there's no way this is going to come out once the wheel is installed as well. After you install it and tighten it to the specified torque, the next thing is to check the runout, and after that we can continue with the adjustments. After the adjustment is complete, as I described earlier, you can reinstall the caliper and caliper mounting bracket in the rear. On the two bolts, you can use some medium strength thread locker applied at the tip, okay, not closer to the center, because only the tip basically screws into the bracket. Okay, I've already installed the top one, and now let's see if I can align the bottom one as well. There we go. Tighten it by hand a bit and then switch to the wrench, and then when it's tight, torque it to 115, that's 115 Newton meters. And we continue. Once everything is installed, the next thing you need to do is go ahead and check the status of the rubbers for the guide pins, the one at the bottom and the one at the top. In my case, they're all fine, I've already checked, as well as the rubber around the caliper piston. Okay, if everything is fine, you should see no fluid leaks and the rubber should be in good shape. If it's not, go ahead and replace it, because you don't want to play around without, especially at the caliper piston, you definitely don't want to have a broken rubber, because then you might end up leaking brake fluid, and that's bad. Right, moving on, you need to press the caliper piston all the way back, because you need to make room for the new disc, which is thicker, as well as supposedly the new pads, which are also thicker than before. You can use, for example, something like this. This is just a box standard C-clamp. It should be at least 10 centimeters wide. And when you're doing this, you should also keep an eye on the brake fluid reservoir in case it doesn't spill out, if, for example, it's overfilled or something like that. Right. Next, if you're installing new pads, they should come with two new shims, these parts, the one down here and the one up here. So discard the old ones and install the new ones. They should just clamp in place. In my case, obviously, as I'm reusing the pads, I'm keeping the shims, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to take them out and I'm going to clean them. Most importantly, you need to clean the areas where the brake pads will move on, which is this part down here, as well as this part, let me point it out better, this part up here. So these need to be really clean, and with the tip of a screwdriver, I also recommend that you apply a bit of Ceratec on top to make the sliding of the pads just a little bit easier. So once that's done, you can go ahead and install the shims and install your new brake pads as well. They just slide into place. Okay, it's fairly simple. And once the pads are installed, as you can see, and greased up at the contact points, just as I explained earlier, the last thing to do is to install the bolts for the caliper guide pins. With new pads, you should receive new bolts, so use the new ones if you do. I'm gonna just reuse the existing one that goes down here. Okay, it gets tightened by hand, and then it needs to be torqued to 35 Newton meters. Don't forget, you need a 17mm key to hold the pin in place as you torque the bolt down. And once that is done, the last thing to do is to install the wheel and tighten the wheel nuts to 130 Newton meters or 125, whichever you prefer. Take the jacks out and lower the car. And that's pretty much it for the mechanical part of the rear brakes. And I nearly forgot, when you're all done on the right hand side, don't forget to install the pad wear sensor back. Well, basically, if you forget to install it, I think the car itself might tell you with the amber light in the dashboard. But in any case, this just gets installed by hand to the inner brake pad. Let's see if I can align it properly. There it is. And push, you should hear a small click. There we go. That's installed. Okay. And before you start the engine and move the car, do not forget to remove the chokes at the front wheels, because if you do move the car on top of them, you will squish them and you'll have to buy new ones. Well, ask me how I know. Right. Okay, so now that the mechanics are done, we need to move the parking brake, the EPB, the electric parking brake, into the latch position, if I remember correctly, i.e. put it back to normal. And for this we will use our diagnostic tool, just as we did earlier on. And we're now in the car with the ignition switch on and that familiar parking brake light that keeps blipping. And with our unit connected, we're gonna try and drive the parking brake to the latching position, i.e. normal operating mode. Let's see if we get it to work. So set the ignition switch to on. It is. We hit OK. Let's see if this works. It says for some odd reason engine running, switch off the engine. We're gonna try again. We hit OK. Okay, it seems it may not want to cooperate now. Maybe it just needs a software update. I'll check later. So just cancel the operation. Ignition to off. Okay, well, let's remove this. So what can we do in this situation? Well, let's see. Put the contact on. And if we actually try to apply the handbrake, it just says parking brake off, lift switch to apply. So that's simple. Just grab on the switch and pull on it. Keep pulling continuously for a couple of seconds. And that's it. The beeping stops and everything is back to normal. Right? So if you now push on the brake and press it down, it just shuts down, turns off as it would normally would. And if you then press up, it engages. So everything is back to normal. Okay, and now we need to do two things. First, we need to go on a test drive to bed in the brake pads to the new discs. And after that is done, we need to run the parking brake shoe bedding in procedure to the new discs. Okay, let's get to it. And just something worth mentioning, as you've seen, we've used what's called coated rotors. So they have a layer of paint on them which helps prevent rust. That is the reason why we didn't use brake cleaner on it. And as you can see, the layer of paint on the actual braking surface where the pad touched the rotor is actually going to be removed through normal brake operation. As you can see, I just moved the car like 2 meters, applied the brakes, and it's already starting to remove that layer of paint. If you drive for, I don't know, 10 minutes and apply the brakes like you normally would, that layer of paint is going to come off, and that's absolutely normal. Okay, onwards with the test drive. Okay, so concerning the bedding in of the pads to the discs, every manufacturer basically recommends that after you install new pads or new discs, or new pads and new discs, for the first 200-400 kilometers, you should only apply light to moderate braking and do your best to avoid sudden brakes and powerful brakes. One thing you can do to help the bedding in procedure is do a number of cycles where you gently accelerate to something like 80 kilometers an hour, that's like 50 miles an hour, and then applying medium braking, slow down somewhere around 20 kilometers an hour. So just as I'm doing right now, slowly accelerating up to about 80 kilometers an hour. I'm on an open and empty stretch of road, and once I hit 80, I just apply medium braking, just like this, all the way down to 20. Once I hit 20, I accelerate again and repeat the procedure. Do this for, let's say, about 10 times. This isn't a substitute for proper bedding in, but it definitely helps. It's definitely better than just to immediately drive as you would normally. So once again, getting close to 80 kilometers an hour, like so, and again apply the brake, light to medium application of the brakes, again emphasizing don't apply the brakes too harshly. Otherwise, the major risk is you're gonna form that cementite on the rotors, because you'd be overheating the rotors and transferring pad material to the rotors, which will fuse to the iron, and then you're gonna start getting brake judder. Okay, and third time, 70 now, and slowing down because there's a curve. In any case, you get the idea. We'll continue doing this for about 10 times and then do like maybe 20-30 kilometers of normal driving to make sure that the brakes operate as they should. But in any case, after this small amount of driving, it appears that the brake judder that I was feeling before has gone, which is extremely encouraging. Okay, onwards with the test. And here's how the brakes look like after driving for 3 kilometers. You see, the surface where the pad actually touches the rotor has been cleaned to bare steel, and everything else has retained the coat of paint for protection. I've finished my test drive. Everything seems to be in order, no brake judder, no overheating, so that's a good sign. Which means now we have to do the parking brake shoe bedding in, because we installed new discs. To do this, we need to start the bedding in procedure, which as per the Land Rover manual implies that you need to do the following actions within 10 seconds. Apply the foot brake 3 times, and on the third, keep it pressed. Then apply the handbrake 4 times, so pull 4 times on it upwards, and then release it 3 times, i.e. apply push on it 3 times and hold a bit on the third. If everything is correct, you should see a message on the dashboard. So let's see if I can get it right. And with the engine running, we go 1, 2, 3 and hold, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And we got it. See, it says EPB service mode. Well, you'd think I got it right the first time, but no, this is actually my 4th attempt. But in any case, we are in this mode. So what we need to do now is do 10 cycles, during which we need to accelerate to between 30 and 35 kilometers an hour, or between 90 and 22 miles an hour. And then we're gonna pull on the handbrake all the way until the car stops. Okay? After this happens, we need to either wait for a minute or drive for 500 meters to make sure the discs and the brakes cool down, and then we repeat the process. If we get everything right, after 10 cycles, the procedure should shut down automatically. If not, you can always exit it by shutting the engine off or by going above, is it 50 kilometers an hour. So here's how it looks like. We accelerate to, let's say, 30 kilometers an hour. Okay, we hold it steady, and then we pull on the handbrake, and that makes the car stop, just like that. Okay, and then we can either wait for 1 minute or drive for 500 meters. We're gonna drive, so release the EPB, press the brake and release the EPB, and start moving again, and repeat the procedure another 9 times. That's it. And I finished the parking brake shoe bedding in procedure. I did about 12 cycles and then accelerated past 50 kilometers an hour to have it disabled. Drove for a while longer, and now I've stopped. The brakes seem okay. No overheating, no bad smells or anything, and it appears that the judder has gone. Fingers crossed that it will remain like this. In any case, this is the procedure to change your rear brake discs, brake pads, and so on. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!